Hi YouTube. I don't ever really make videos, but if you guys want to know, like, I guess my YouTuber name, I guess it's Miffy D. That's what I go by on like Steam and other games and like stuff like that. But the only reason I'm making a video today is because I recently saw a YouTube video by a YouTuber named Club V Lone. It was titled "Can Dokkan Battle Be Fixed?" And it was basically talking about like Dokkan Battle and the current state of the game, characters, the hidden potential system, and the way that events and missions, like, you know, I guess you could say there's not really that much replayability, and sometimes it's very stale. Like, there's very stale periods on Dokkan. And, you know, this video isn't supposed to be any hate. It's more so like a response to kind of like, you know, respond, can it be fixed in a way, or if it even needs fixing. And personally, it's kind of like, I do think Dokkan does have stale periods, and I don't think there's very much to grind besides link skills. But that's the thing, it's kind of like, that's with every game, really. Like I'm saying, people who play Genshin Impact, people who play Destiny 2 a lot, people who play like really any game that is kind of like PvP or PvE, there's going to be moments where you're wanting to grind for things and you're trying to like get achievements, or you're trying to get certain things in the game. But then there's going to be times where there's like no new content, nothing new, nothing enjoyable. And, you know, that's just kind of how games go, especially with mobile games a lot, because of how, like, you know, it takes time for them to design, go and produce, and like tease and advertise content. Those, like, I guess stale periods or dry areas are kind of like necessary evils in order for like the game to be really fun. I mean, like, as someone who like know people who play Genshin and I talk to them about it, like, you know, they get really hyped for like whenever they have like a new character, new summons, or a new like area. Or like for myself, it's like there's times in Dokkan where it's like, yeah, it's boring, but at least I know that something new is coming, or like, you know, new unique characters are going to be released. And that's the thing, I feel like a lot of global players like feel that Dokkan is constantly stale because like we already know what JP's getting, while like, you know, and we know that it's going to come to us ultimately. But that's the thing, like for JP players, they're always wondering what's coming next. They're theorizing, they're trying to do all of this. So, you know, for us global players, it's kind of like opening a, like, you know, a Christmas tree present and you already know what's inside. So it kind of takes away the, like, you know, I guess the dopamine rush that the JP players will get. And we're just sitting here wondering, okay, when are we going to get it? When are we going to get it? So to counter-argue Mr. Vlone's point about the hidden potential system, I do think it's pretty linear and simple, and I think that's kind of a good thing, but it can be boring at times. But personally, I feel like building dodge on units 90% of the time is just objectively smart. I mean, like in video games, there's usually always an objective way, or like, you know, a way to build characters or play the game to get the most out of it. I mean, the truth said it himself, if you aren't getting hit, you're winning. But whatever people choose is purely up to them. Like, if you want to build your character additional or crit, I think that's really fine, and it all depends on how you build your characters and how you really build your teams in general. A lot of people don't really understand that dodge is probably the most viable for the upper echelon of fights, but depending on how you have characters, if you want a character to be a tank or more like offensive, I think anything's really viable. I just think that people don't want to break the mold because they know how good dodge is. And I feel like if it's not broke, why fix it? I think dodge is a really good thing, and I think the hidden potential system, the only thing that should be changed is the fact that gems have to be used to fix your character's build if you mess up. That's terrible. Okay, so now we're going to touch on the gear idea that Mr. Vlone had. I think that if something like gear was implemented into Dokkan, it would cause a pretty big issue for the free-to-play players, and also pose a big discrepancy between different units. Now, obviously, this will depend on the development and how, like, Amatsu and his team would, like, supposedly add it into the game. But I feel like there would have to be gear banners, and there most likely would be. And my earlier claim about how it would force free-to-play users to choose either on summoning for gear or summoning for units, that's gonna definitely cause an issue, because like Mr. Vlon's claim was that there's barely any content and Dokkan is too stale. So then there's gonna be a lack of gems, and the free-to-play players who have like that set amount of gems that they can get from just playing, they're gonna have to choose between gear and units. And typically it's always better to have a unit rather than gear. Now, I feel like the banners in general would just be like a cash grab, because I mean the Supreme Kai banners have been in the game like ever since, and they're 25 gems. But everybody knows that they're a waste and that you can get like Supreme Kais from anniversaries or just from like regular missions and stuff like that. Now, the discrepancy between units, like for example, I kind of came up with this, but it's like, let's say there was a special Capsule Corp armor, right? That's like an item in the game, right? And it will raise your defense by 120% and you'll guard whenever in second turn, right? You could put that on a weaker character in order to ensure they survive attacks, but that same piece of gear could prove more effective on a character whose passive synergizes like way better with the gear. And some might say it's a case-by-case basis depending on the unit, but I feel like there's only so far that gear and effects could be used to protect a unit, especially because power creep is a thing. But that's also a double-edged sword, because gear and effects could make a unit completely unkillable or turn into a nuker. But aside from that, that's just really my initial analysis about the gear, because I really feel like with the system and the simplicity that Dokkan has with their hidden potential system and like what's it called, with the skill orbs, I think they have gotten to a point to where you know how to build characters and it's like pretty cut and dry. And I feel like adding all the intricacies in to the game with having gear sets would just be a little bit too confusing for players, and I just don't know if it's something that Dokkan would handle, because up to this point most people get builds from big names like The Truth, Goresh, Nanogenics, and I feel like if gear was added in, everybody would still flock to what the big three of Dokkan use. So I really don't see any need for it, but I do think it's a good idea, and it could be like a fresh thing that Dokkan could have. But like I said, if it's not broke, why fix it? So I feel like it's not that bad of an idea, but it just really, like, looking at how Omatsu and like I guess his team have been like implementing things recently, they've been doing a really good job, but like it would have to be added in correctly, and the rates and the prices to summon, or if it was like from boss drops, that would all have to be taken into account. And like, I mean, I just don't know if it's something that Dokkan as a game can even really handle. Now, the grind of Dokkan, so Mr. Vlone was pointing out how like Dokkan doesn't do any like weeklies or anything special, and I think a good solution to that would be adding more challenges to get like unique titles to flex your profile and stuff like that, because I personally have always enjoyed like grinding for the titles, grinding for like, you know, my power level and stuff like that. But I understand that this isn't like good enough for a lot of people and it's boring. But this leads me to like my next idea, which is like Dokkan PvP. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but like League of Legends has like a sub game called Teamfight Tactics, and like the whole layout of it is it's like you get characters, and then those characters you can place them down, and then like those characters fight. It's kind of like a card game in a way. But for us, it's like you can make decks out of characters that you've like summoned on. And how it would work is it's like you have a playing field, and your decks, you'll like pull 1, 2, or 3 cards, but you would build decks based on categories or like certain like relationships that cards have with each other to get like an attack boost or a defense boost or something like that. And it would go like maybe 2 or 3 rounds of like just pulling your cards until all your cards are dead or all the enemy's cards are dead. This could also like fulfill the idea of gear too, because like in this PvP mode, then they can have in-game like gear for that PvP mode strictly, and that can like change the way that Dokkan's played. That way like the PvE players, like they don't have to worry about summoning for gear, but the PvP players will. But ultimately, that's just my take on PvP. I'd really like to hear what you guys think. So yeah. So after this Dokkan gameplay ends, I have some teamfight tactics gameplay to give y'all my example of Dokkan PvP. So on the left hand side of the screen, I know it might be small, but there's basically these categories, and depending on how many cards you have on the battlefield, if they're the same category or they're partially in a subcategory, they'll get attack boost or defense boost, or just really certain buffs. And I think this could translate well for Dokkan because of how Dokkan works as a game. We make decks based on categories and link skills. And now, as you can see, like in the top corner where that sprite is, that guy has 2 icons under his like character, and that's essentially like in-game PvP gear. And I feel like that could be a way that we could implement gear into Dokkan, where like there's strictly PvP items that can go along for the PvP mode. Now, as you can see at the bottom half of the screen, those are like his cards that he can pull out, and after every round he can pull out new cards to fight for him, or he can upgrade cards for the next round. And I feel like this could be a cool way that Dokkan could add in PvP. Now again, I'm not saying that this is the best way, but I'm saying I think it's a good template for how PvP could be. Now, like Mr. Vlone said, Epic 7's PvP would be a good way too, and I agree with that. I really do like Epic 7's combat, but at the end of the day, this is just my idea and my take on PvP, so yeah. Okay, so like I said, this is my first YouTube video, so I'm sorry if the production is a little bit trash, but I don't have any more Dokkan gameplay, so I'm going to be using my summon animations to like wrap up the video. But like I said, to wrap things up, I feel like Dokkan could use some changes and some improvements to their game. But respectfully, Mr. Vlone, the comparison to Honkai Star Rail and Genshin is just a little bit unfair. It's like comparing Michael Jordan to LeBron today. It's 2 different games. I think that the take with Epic 7 and their PvP is definitely something Dokkan could use as a template to create their own version of PvP. But I really think that your take about Dokkan hitting 3 billion in profit and not doing anything or the bare minimum is a little bit crazy, because the whole time that it takes to create units, events, design EZAs, design coherent categories, and come up with unique abilities like the territory skills for bosses, domains, standbys, all takes a lot of time, which results in these dead periods in Dokkan. And I mean, I recently read on the Dokkan subreddit while I was like researching, trying to get like info about what people know, that it takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months just for them to design a unit, and that unit's usually the headliner of a small Dokkan fest, or if it's for a big event, it could be more than 3 months. So I would argue that these dead periods are necessary in order for us to have fun content with fun new units. And in all honesty, Dokkan is a pretty simple game, and the way they make their money is from a simple combat system. Get strong characters, beat strong events. I think that's completely fine if all the money that they make goes into making cool, stupidly overpowered headliner characters that people enjoy. I mean, I'd argue that's enough for the community. And I mean, I know all their money doesn't go back into the game, like they have to give some to licensings and stuff like that, but I mean, ultimately, the claim about wanting to use your favorite character in a gacha game isn't too crazy, and I think that there's teams and events that those characters can perform well in. But if you really want that freedom, you might as well go play Xenoverse 2 or Kakarot, because I guess in my opinion, that's just not the type of game that Dokkan is. And I feel like people who play this game are usually playing it more for the idea of getting the strongest character, or the second strongest character, or the third strongest character, or making the best team they can, rather than, oh, I want to pull my favorite character. Like, I mean, obviously there's going to be those occasions where, you know, your favorite character is on a summon and you're going to waste a couple hundred, or maybe even if you have the luxury, waste 1,000 stones just to pull your favorite character, and that's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like your whole like argument about wanting Dokkan to add things in to make weaker characters or favorite characters like more viable is a little bit weak. It's just very arbitrary, because I mean, Dokkan is not obligated to make your favorite character or characters that you enjoy stronger for the upper echelon events. I mean, there's a reason why, like I said, in games there's like an objective meta and a way you're supposed to play in order to beat really hard events and maximize things. But ultimately, Mr. Vlone, this was just my response, and I feel like you had a good amount of takes, and I like the idea of gear. I definitely think it's something they could look into, but I just realistically don't see it happening. And overall, yeah, sorry if the quality was bad, but this was just my response. You guys go give Mr. Club V Lone some love, subscribe, and like. Oh, and the Easy 8s for Broly, Chilai, and Lemo did drop, and the World Tournament is going on, and there's the water bottle event. So you guys go make sure to check out The Truth or Toon Rami. That way you guys can get the info on how to complete those and get the gems. But ultimately, I appreciate you guys for listening. All peace, all love, and see y'all later.